You're standing at the rental car counter. The agent asks if you want the damage waiver, $20 a day. You do the quick mental math, 4-day trip, that's $80. You think, come on, I'm a good driver. I'm not going to hit anything. And you decline. You feel a small, quiet win, like you just outsmarted the upsell. 2 days later, you're backing out of a tight spot in a parking garage, and you clip a concrete pillar you somehow didn't see in the mirror. Small dent, cracked taillight, and now you're standing there doing very different math, staring down a repair bill that's way more than $80, and a very specific, very uncomfortable thought creeps in. I made a choice 2 days ago, and this is the direct result of that choice. Here's the thing about that feeling, and it's not really about the money. My name is Davis. If you've ever declined a small add-on to save a little cash and then spent weeks replaying that decision in your head after something went wrong, hit subscribe. Because today I'm going to show you why some $20 decisions aren't actually about the odds at all. They're about a specific kind of regret, and understanding that regret changes how you should be making these calls. Let's start with the real problem, because it's not what people assume. Most people evaluate a decision like the damage waiver purely on probability. What are the odds I actually get in an accident? Pretty low, statistically, so skipping it feels like a reasonable bet. But here's what most people don't realize. The odds were never actually the most important variable in this decision. What matters more is what kind of bad outcome you're setting yourself up for if things go wrong. And there's a very specific type of bad outcome that hits differently than the rest. Psychologists have a name for this. It's the difference between regret from something you did, an action, and regret from something you didn't do, an omission. And here's the counterintuitive part. When the outcome is bad, people tend to feel worse about losses that came from an active choice to skip protection than from pure bad luck that happened to them passively, even when the dollar amount is identical. Getting hit by another driver through no fault of your own feels like bad luck. Declining the waiver and then damaging the car yourself feels like a mistake you made, personally, on purpose, 2 days before it happened. Same repair bill. Completely different emotional experience. Let's walk through this with the actual asymmetry because this is where it gets real. Picture 2 versions of the same trip. In version 1, you pay the $20 a day, $80 total, and nothing happens. You never think about it again. It doesn't even register as a memory. It's just a line item on a receipt you'll never look at twice. In version 2, you decline the $80, and on day 2, you clip that pillar. Now you're not just paying a repair bill that's probably several $100s more than the $80 you saved. You're also replaying the decision. You're telling your partner the story, slightly embarrassed. You're thinking about it randomly for weeks, at random moments, the "I should have just paid for it" thought showing up uninvited while you're trying to fall asleep. The financial gap between these 2 versions is real, but the emotional gap is even bigger, and it's not symmetrical. Paying and never needing it costs you almost nothing, not even attention. Skipping it and needing it costs you money, plus weeks of low-grade self-directed frustration that has nothing to do with the actual dollar amount. Here's why this matters more than people realize. If the 2 outcomes were emotionally symmetrical, if declining and being fine felt exactly as good as paying and being fine, then this really would just be a pure odds calculation, and skipping it low probability stuff would make sense. But they're not symmetrical. Declining and being fine feels like a mild little win you forget by dinner. Declining and getting hit feels like a mistake that follows you around. That asymmetry is the actual math you should be doing, not just the probability of an accident. Let me give you 2 friends on the same trip, Elena and Marcus, splitting a rental car. Elena wants to add the waiver. Marcus thinks it's a waste of $80 and talks her into skipping it to split the savings. Nothing happens for the whole trip. On the last day, backing out of that same parking garage, Marcus clips the pillar. Small damage, a few $100s in repair costs. Financially, it's split between them, so it's not even that dramatic per person. But here's what actually happens afterward. Marcus feels responsible, not just for the money, but for talking Elena into skipping the waiver in the first place. He brings it up unprompted weeks later, still a little annoyed at himself. Elena, meanwhile, is mostly fine with it, but there's a small, quiet, "I told you we should have just gotten it," sitting underneath the whole thing that neither of them says out loud, but both of them are thinking. Same trip, same amount of actual money lost per person. But the story that gets told afterward and the way it sits in memory is completely different from a trip where nothing happened at all. So how should you actually think about this? Here's the framework. For small, optional protections like this, rental car waivers, travel insurance, similar add-ons, run a specific gut check. Ask yourself, if this goes wrong and I skipped the protection, will I mostly blame bad luck, or will I blame myself for the choice? If the honest answer is that you'd blame yourself, that's a strong signal. The $20 is worth paying, not because the odds demand it, but because you're not just buying protection from the financial cost. You're buying protection from a specific, personal kind of regret that tends to linger far longer than the actual dollar amount justifies. Second, don't overthink categories where the amount is genuinely small relative to the potential story you'd be telling yourself afterward. A $20 a day waiver on an $80 total is a tiny amount compared to weeks of replaying a decision in your head. The math doesn't need to be complicated here. The regret asymmetry alone usually settles it. Third, apply this same lens beyond rental cars. Travel insurance on a trip you can't easily reschedule. A small warranty on something you'd personally be annoyed you skipped. Anything where the bad outcome would feel like, I did this to myself, rather than, that was just bad luck. Here's the identity shift underneath all of this. Some $20 decisions aren't really about the $20. They're about which version of yourself you're setting up to exist in the bad outcome timeline. The version who shrugs and says that's just bad luck. Or the version who lies awake thinking about a choice they made on purpose 2 days before it went wrong. Paying a small amount to guarantee you're the first version, not the second, is a completely legitimate use of $20, even if the odds of needing it are genuinely low. So here's your action step. Next time you're standing at a counter or checking a box for a small optional protection, skip the probability math entirely and ask the regret question instead. If this goes wrong, will I blame bad luck or myself? Let that answer decide it, not the odds. If this changed how you think about these small decisions, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever skipped a small protection like this and regretted it?